Today I want to talk about acting and yoga. Acting and yoga, how are those connected? Well, funny story. So, I guess not so funny. It's just that throughout my life, I've done a lot of things. One of those things was being an actor. Not that I was an Academy Award-winning actor, but I did have a little experience in the field. And during that time, I went to a workshop. So an acting workshop is just something you go to get better as an actor. And during this particular workshop, we did a kind of a exercise, you could say. It's pretty simple. All we did was they would have you and someone else partner up. You would just face each other. And then they would give you one word, and you would have to say that word to the other person. And then they would have to say that same word back to you, and then back and forth it went. But each time you said it, you would have to say it with a different way. So to give an example, they would use the word so, S-O. Simple, right? Barely even a word, just 2 letters. But you can say so many different ways, like so. So. See, each way you can say it differently. The same thing with a simple word like and. See, each way you say it's different. And if you really think about that, if one little word, 2, 3 letters, something like this, you can say in so many different ways. Each word is kind of like that. So a whole sentence could be said a million different ways. If you gave, fairly well-trained actors all a script, never mind a script, just a line or a few words, and have them each say it, you would get completely different ways of reading it, especially if you didn't give any context. If they didn't know which direction they're supposed to take it, they could take it a million different ways. Usually as an actor, depending on what it is, you would often want to make it somehow interesting or unique, or what's a different way I could take these words? What kind of route can I take them down? That's what's kind of beautiful about being an actor. And it's a fun, creative challenge. But it also, in terms of inner growth and yoga, makes you realize, there are so many ways to say things. Now, when you take that to something like a question, now we're getting somewhere. Because, let's say that you're doing something compulsive. You're repeating a pattern, maybe you're slightly addicted to something, whatever, and it's frustrating you. So you might ask a question like, why am I doing this? And by asking this question, you're frustrated. You're adding all of this extra to the question. So it's not even really a question anymore. It becomes more of a comment. It becomes more like an expression of your frustration. And so by doing this, you're not really trying to get an answer. You're just frustrating, why? It's not even really a genuine inquiry. So you can shift this. If you take away some of the added emotion and presumption, for example, you might be thinking, I'm stupid, I'm bad, I'm a fool, I am this or that. You've added this, so it's tainting the question in a way. But if you remove this and just ask, why am I doing this? And let it be a genuine moment of inquiry into yourself, a genuine question. Then you might actually find an answer. You might be able to really look at it and get some clarity. See, what it means to have clarity is just that when you're trying to figure out the answer to a question like this, why do I do this? You're trying to look at it just the way it is. You're trying to set aside all of the conclusions and assumptions and all that kind of stuff. We talked about this in a previous video about knowing what do you actually know and what's all the story. So if you separate this and just try and look at it the way it is, then you can actually get somewhere. This is actually where we start getting away from acting and into yoga, because in yoga, we see a question as being sacred. When I say sacred, I mean, so you can ask a question a million different ways, like we just looked at with this example, but you can also, suppose you're in school, someone doesn't like the clothes you're wearing or something, they're bothered by it. So they might ask, why are you wearing that? Now, they're not really asking a question, are they? No, they're making a comment. They're using a question as a comment or a statement. And there's many ways to do that. These are all simplistic for you to get the point, but the more sophisticated you become in language, the more you're able to use it in different ways to say things without being so bluntly saying things. You may say things that go over someone's head, but then to the other people in the room, they realize you've just said something. And that may not make sense, but when it makes sense, it really makes sense. When you see it, when you observe it, when you experience it, or you have to use it on someone else who's being a silly or whatever, then it starts becoming clear how language can be used. But we look at a question as sacred because when someone wants to become a seeker, they're essentially saying they want to know the truth about something. And if they want to know the truth, if it's a real, like a burning question, like you can barely sleep or eat, you have to know the answer. It is killing you to not know. Now, it is not a comment, it's not a passing thing, it's not an intellectual curiosity. You're not trying to accumulate knowledge to seem fancy at a dinner party or whatever. It's not a social thing. For yourself, you have to know. What is it? Maybe someone's trying to understand what death is, or maybe they're trying to process like why they are the way they are, who they are, where they came from. These are like big questions, and they require intense inquiry to really know. So if you have to get into that and ask that kind of question. So let's say you asked that kind of question and you asked me. Well, if the question you're asking is something I actually know, then I have to answer you. I cannot brush it off. It is a genuine question. It's sacred in that sense. So I have to ask. I have to answer if you ask. If that's something that I know. It's not like I should bullshit you with some nonsense answer. I'm saying if the answer is something that I've experienced and I know, and you ask, I have to help you understand. So this is what a seeker, and especially people on the spiritual path, how we value a question. And we hold it like that because if you use a question in a different way, like earlier I gave the example of, why are you wearing that, right? Suppose someone's genuinely asking a question and you give this kind of a snarky answer. You could shut them down. And the people around you, your world, as far as you know it, is just the people that you've met and the places you've been. Like, that's the world as you know it. There is no world as the whole, because you don't know the whole world. You only know the people and places you're around. So if you go about shutting down and making people feel bad or bullying people for genuinely asking a question, you're shutting down their curiosity. You're making them potentially feel insecure or uncomfortable asking genuine questions. So they'll hide it. And then you've now destroyed their possibility of seeking. And that is just, it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy to do that to yourself. And it's even worse, you do that to someone else. Or suppose a child, genuinely curious, and you mock them, you make fun of them, you tease them. They're genuinely trying to know something. Why would you do that? If you really think about it, the idea that a question is sacred is so clear. It's so obvious. This is something worth treasuring and nurturing in human beings, because the more curious we are, the more we want to actually know about the world around us. And the more we want to know about the world around us, the less likely we'll be to just come to conclusions and assumptions about things and go along causing problems everywhere we go out of our own ignorance. The more we'll be honest with ourselves, and there's nothing more sacred than that. So, if you are on the spiritual path, then this is the kind of insight I gained from the acting world, and I hope you can make use of it in your own life. And hey, even try that experiment if you want to see for yourself. Get a friend and just take a word like and or so, something simple, any word really. See how many ways you can ask it, how many ways you can say it to give a different meaning, a totally different meaning. Just try for yourself and see. And then realize that when you ask a question, there's many ways to ask a question. So how are you asking questions? Not just to other people, to yourself. How are you asking these questions? When you can shift to a genuine sense of inquiry, a real, genuine question, then you're actually getting closer to finding answers. This is what I've found to be true for myself, and I think if you ask the question to yourself, you may find that it's also true for you. But let me know, how have asking questions impacted your life? Have you been asking cruel questions to yourself or others? Or are you more of a genuine questioner? And be honest with yourself, because at the end of the day, like we were talking in another video, there's really no point in lying to ourselves about anything, maybe to other people, but not to yourself. So find genuine inquiry and see how to make that a part of your life. And I think you'll find it'll change your life dramatically.